think it's going to be exciting? Do you think anything that starts with data can be exciting? Right? Now, what I'm going to try and do is to make it exciting, right? In fact, I'm hoping this is probably the most exciting thing you see this week, right? My name is Sati. I founded this organization called Lymbyc. And what we are trying to do essentially is to bring man and machine together to create a solution that allows businesses to consume insights instantaneously. Right? Now, you've heard that story before, I'm sure, from other guys, right? But I'm going to sort of show you how we've done it. And then I'm going to talk you through the story before I get there so you understand why we do it better. Okay? Cool. So I'm going to start with this question. Okay? Now, you guys are probably thinking that we're in the middle of a data science conference and I'm asking a question like that. What's the answer going to be? If I ask the question, are you going to invest in data science? What's that answer going to be? Assume that you're answering on behalf of all the organizations that you know. What would the answer be? What percentage do you think it's going to be? Come on. Some guesses? No guesses? Sorry? So, yeah, pretty much, right? In fact, why don't you just use the 95% of organizations said they have or they will. And that was 3 years ago, right? So pretty much close to 100% are probably there. So let me ask you another question, right? If now I asked you, how many of you think, right, how many organizations do you think are happy with their investments? What do you think that number is going to look like? Well, you're really pessimistic. It's not that bad yet, but it's close enough. So Forrester did a survey. This was a few months back at the end of 2017, and 20% are happy, which means 8 out of 10 organizations, they're not getting the return on their investment. So why is that happening? Right? Think about it. Why is that happening? If I had to describe to you the analytics value chain, right? And that actually applies to any form of insight, frankly. Okay? So what does it look like? It starts with data or information. From there, you have to have a place where you can store it, access it, do things to it, right? Prepare it. Then you want to see it. Once you see it, once you visualize it, then you have questions, right? So your questions are like, you're the business, right? So your questions are like, okay, I can see my metrics. Why is this happening, right? What is driving my market share, or what is driving my consideration, or whatever it is, right? Once you got those answered, then you say, what is going to happen? What's my demand going to be like? Who's likely to buy my product, right? And so on and so forth. And then finally, it goes into strategy. Right? Everybody's with me on that? Yeah? Now, that is common across any form of insight. Whether you look at analytics, which traditionally associated with transactional data, or you look at market research, or you look at social, digital, all of them follow that same thing. Right? Now, let's get into it. Okay? If you look at the first half of that, that value chain, from your data up till your visualization, right? You have a lot of solutions out there. You have a lot of data platforms out there. You have a lot of visualization solutions out there. I mean, this decade has been the decade of the tableaus and click views, right? Now look at the second half of it, right? The second half of it is entirely human-driven. It's human analysts. Yes, they have their own tools, but if the business has to get an insight, they cannot get it directly, right? Why is something happening? You don't ask a machine today. You ask a human, right? Now sort of think about it. What is that first half about, really? If you had to boil that whole thing down, what is that first half about? That first half is about process and rules. As if things couldn't get worse. I hope you guys can still hear me. Okay. So that first half, if you see, right? It's about the process of how the data is flowing and the rules you got to apply. Which is why you can put a machine to work on it. Right? The second half is about ambiguity. Think about it. If you have to boil the whole thing down, what do analysts do that machines can't? They reduce ambiguity. They make decisions on how to interpret things and what those implications are, right? So what is the outcome then? So if you look at it in the first half, my outcome is information. Right? Information is great, but I can't make decisions as a business on information alone. How much sales did we do of product X yesterday? Good to know. What does that tell me what to do next? Nothing. That is actually a feed into insight, right? Because the insight is actually going to be what is going to be my sales tomorrow, or who is the person that I can sell to tomorrow, right? And that is essentially decision, and that's what I want as a business, right? So where are we at? So we are saying that my decisions are coming from insights. Insights are generated by humans today, right? And businesses are not happy with the investment. Are you seeing the picture that's forming? Right? So now sort of let's look at, oh, this is up, great, thanks. So yeah, you can skip this, I just finished this, yeah. So, so before, stay on it. So before we go to sort of how we solve it, let's see why that is happening, right? So what does the analyst do today in any organization? Okay, this is what it looks like, and I'm being generous, guys. Okay, when I say 80% is business as usual and 20% is competitive advantage. What is business as usual? Okay, data pulls. Okay, hi, this is the sales leader. I need a sales report. This is the analyst, right? But you have it on Tableau, right? Oh no, what I need is a different report because I comp my sales guys on product X and Y, but not Z. So I need a report that tells me what's the fraction of sales of X and Y, but not Z, which is not there on Tableau, right? Yeah, okay, I'm on it, right? How many of us have done that? No, I have done it, right? And on an average, between 40 to 50% of all the work analysts do is this, summarizations, right? The BI guys like to call it analytics, but the analysts know that this is data pull, right? A fancy data pull. Now, once you pass that, you want to build models, right? So you will have propensity models, you'll have loyalty churn models, you'll have risk, fraud, operations, all kinds of models, right? These are models that get built every year. Why do we build them again? Because the data has changed. And so you want to look at it, you want to see if the algorithm needs to change, right? You want to see if the interpretations are different. If you already have built a model, you will check model performance, right? Standard stuff, right? How much time is left after that? After the data pulls, after all of this? Very little. Right. Now, why is none of this a competitive advantage any longer? Go back to my question, right? First question. How many organizations have adopted or are looking to adopt data science? Almost 100%. So if everybody is doing it, where's your advantage? Where is the competitive advantage if everybody is building the same models? Right? Think about it. Yeah, okay, my algorithm is better. I have a 0.5% higher lift. which is great. That's also a lot of rupees and dollars. But that's just incremental. That's not true competitive advantage. True competitive advantage comes when I'm looking at new ways of answering new questions, right? Using different sources of data, different algorithms, experimental stuff, right? We are working with Unilever right now, where we're trying to create a deep learning model that will actually read from a chart and create implications, something that a human would do otherwise. Now, where's the time for Unilever to do that when they're building their BAU stuff, right? So, and by the way, this is best case. I mean, a PNG would be probably here. Most organizations, that 20%, you can probably drop the 2. Most organizations, truly, right? Globally, not just sort of India. So what do we really want it to be, right? We want it to be this. We want that the BAU stuff happens on autopilot, and the analyst actually spends building competitive advantage for their organizations, right? So how do we do that, right? How do we resolve the ambiguity? Because we go back to that question, right? The reason the human is in the loop is because there's ambiguity that needs resolving. So how do we resolve ambiguity, keeping the human outside of the loop? Right? The answer is artificial intelligence, right? So if you look at this century has been tremendous in terms of advancing how to use data science, right? First you had the computing power, right? That has completely transformed in the last 30 years. Then you had advanced software that analysts could use. And now you have artificial intelligence that actually allows you to train machines to resolve ambiguity on their own, right? So I don't want to keep talking. I want to show you stuff, right? So very quickly, introducing Leni. Leni is something that we have created. She's the world's first virtual analyst, which means that we intend her to be everything that a human analyst is outside of a physical form, okay? Which means what? Which means if you look at anything that an organization asks, right, in any function, fits into 3 levels. It'll either be a where, what, who kind of question, right, classic BI kind of stuff, or it will be a diagnostic question, right, which is, why is certain thing happening, what are the drivers of X, Y, Z, and then it's predictive. Everything somebody asks will fall into one of these 3. Prescriptive is something that is now coming, and machine intelligence will drive a lot of that, which is, can you get intelligence before you ask the question, right? But let's stick with the first 3. And which is why, we call Leni the world's first virtual analyst, because she can actually function at all of these levels today, okay? Most other solutions that you look at, including AI-based ones, are really still on 1 and a little bit of 2. There is some bit of 3 as well, but as long as it's predefined, you can't do stuff on the fly, okay? So what am I going to demo to you? I'm taking a particularly ambiguous scenario. So if anybody here from the pharma life sciences sector? No? Okay. But you guys understand sales, marketing, right? So if you look at pharma marketing's a bit of a challenge, because what happens there is that unlike other sectors, you can't really reach out to quote unquote your consumers because regulation doesn't allow you. You can't even talk to your decision maker, which is that physician, because regulation doesn't allow you. So how do you create a market view? You triangulate. So you look at, what is the therapeutic area look like, which is the disease state or disorder or whatever that you are trying to solve. You look at government stats, you look at some private data. To build a view of the market, you look at prescription data. So there's an organization called IMS, right, that collects this data and then it sells it to drug companies. So you use that to understand what your market shares are looking like, what are the drugs in play and things like that. Then you also look at drug pipeline data, because that's important. If a new drug comes in, it can change the marketplace. And then you take all of this and then you try and project it out, right? You forecast, you know, where is the market heading, where is the therapeutic area heading, what do I need to do? This activity happens anywhere between 2 to 4 times a year. And each time, depending on the size of the organization, it can take anywhere between 4 to 5 analysts about 4 to 6 weeks to get it done. Because imagine the number of different data forms you're looking at and the things that you're trying to do, right? So we're going to put Leni to work on this, okay? This is what Leni looks like, okay? The idea was to keep it really simple, because the idea was that the thing that stops business users from using any kind of a solution today is the fact that they have to learn how to use it. That's even something as simple as Tableau, you'll find less than 5% of business users actually using it. They don't want to, right? Because what's their preferred mode? Their preferred mode is, hey, analyst, I have this question. So we said Leni has to function the same way, right? So let's go in. Now, you remember the scenario I laid out, right? So imagine I'm a drug company. I'm the brand manager, right? I have to launch a drug, okay? And I have all of these questions that we were looking at there. So I want to start with, and this is a diabetes drug that I want to launch, okay? So I want to start with in US. So what's the population, right, of diabetics in the US is what I want to know first, let's say. So I get the answer. Now, what did I do? I didn't have to point it to a database. I didn't have to point it to the variable or whatever it is that I need. I didn't have to select anything. I just asked the question like I'd ask an analyst. Now let's do it again and see how it did it, right? Why don't you run this for maybe for New York. So hold it here a second. What you see here, right? Now it's already figured out from all the different data sets at the back. It's already figured out that this is epi data that it has to look at, right? But there it is finding 3 different data sets that can possibly answer this question, right? Now this screen normally happens when we are setting it up, okay? Because once the setup is done, you won't even see the screen. What is happening in that setup phase? It is learning from this input. So if all users can select all 3 data sets, by the time setup is done and somebody asks this question, it will show all 3. If I only pick one all the time, or most users pick one only all the time, then it learns. Okay? Keep going. So you can see, so you can see the response. Now, let's move on to a statistic, right? So let's say, what is the prevalence rate? This thing's gone. What's the prevalence rate, right? Now, when it came to sort of looking at this data, it had to look at a variable, pull it out, right? Simple. Now I'm asking for prevalence rate because that's essentially what I use, right? But prevalence rate is not in the data. So what does Leni do? Right? Leni goes, checks her KPI library, sees is there a KPI called prevalence rate, right? It finds it and it computes it and shows it to us. Okay? Now, few things, right? You see this section here? Now, I don't know if anybody noticed what were the questions that were showing up earlier. This set keeps changing depending on the question you ask. It's pretty much like how you use Amazon, right? You look at something and it says you may also want to see these other related items, right? This kind of works the same way. There is a fuzzy-wuzzy recommendation model that is sitting in a ML environment that is learning from user behavior. Why is that important? Because imagine in an organization across many users, right? How do you learn things? If a new user comes in and they don't even know what questions to ask, Leni can help. Right? So let's sort of, now I've understood what the market, the therapeutic area looks like, what's the prevalence rate. I want to get a sense of the marketplace, right? So I want to know you know, and obviously if I'm launching a drug, I'll do it in a certain drug class, right? So let's say I want to know what's the TRX flow for SGLT2. Give it to me for 2017. Okay. TRX flow is a standard term, KPI, that is used in the pharma industry. It means total prescriptions. Okay. It's like asking what's the total market share, or, you know, addressable market out there, right? SGLT2 is the drug class. So you can see, you know, if you can see here, it has switched to the data source, which is IMS here. I didn't have to point it. It's picked the SGLT2 filter and it showed me this, right? So now I want to get one level deeper. I want to see it by brands because that's my competition. Can we see it by brands? So you can see, you know, it showed me that. The other interesting thing, right? All the visualizations you've seen so far, the human intervention has been zero, absolutely zero. There are no templates, there are no charts that a human has prepared. Because Leni is an artificial being, we have taught her the principles of how to visualize, the same way you'll teach a new analyst on your team. Right? An analyst joins your team, you tell them, hey, you know, might be a good idea to use a pie if you're showing a market share, or if you're doing comparison, show bars, or you're showing a trend, use a line chart, something like that, right? Basics. Same thing. How does that help? It means your setup is that much more quicker. It also means that you have no bounds or restrictions in the kind of questions you can ask. Because nobody has to create an interface. Leni will do it for you. Right? So now let's step the game up, because all this stuff is still in the KPI, you know, data pull kind of range, right? So if I'm going to launch a brand, I want to get a sense of what drives brand awareness, right? So let's ask the question, you know, what are the drivers of brand awareness? Now this is a very complex question, if you think about it. I have to identify, if you ask it to an analyst, right? I have to identify what data I need to look at. I need to obviously pick the variables. Now I'm asking for what are the drivers of awareness here, right? So brand awareness is my target variable, my Y, so to say. I have to identify the X's. I have to build a transfer function and show you the results, right? Typically, and for the kind of question we've asked, this is, you will go to a market research brand track kind of a data set, which you see it has done. It's picked the market research data set, right? This one here it's run a JRW algorithm. Right? It's a Johnson's weight reduction, a reduced weight function. And this is an activity that would have taken my analyst about a week to do, start to it, right? So now, for a second, let's assume that I'm launching this brand, and I want to see, I want to do quickly a Twitter campaign, right? I've launched my Twitter campaign. Now I want to start seeing results. Now obviously there are tools out there that allow you to look at that kind of stuff, but in isolation, not with other data. Right? You got to create an entire environment if you want to make that happen. Right? So let's ask Leni that question. Now unfortunately, because this is a demo and this is a fictional drug, there will be nothing on Twitter. Let's see what's trending. Narendra Modi is trending. Okay, he always trends, doesn't he? So let's ask, I want to know who are the key opinion leaders for hashtag Narendra Modi. You want to know that, right? Any communication campaign, you want to know who the key opinion leaders are. Now we're going to do this live. We picked a hashtag that is trending right now, and we're going to ask it a question. This might take a few minutes because it's going to ping and this is coming from Twitter's public API. So it's going to ping it. It's going to filter for hashtag Narendra Modi, extract it, analyze it, build the entire network analysis graph, right? Takes time, right? Oh, we're there. Good. A little bit more. Okay, that should be fine. So, you know, it's showing me the net. If you can rotate it a little bit, not pan, rotate, yeah. We are finally defeated by a touchpad. Okay. What's happening, man?
What happened?
Hold on one second. Okay. Why is this happening?
No,
Okay, fine.
we just pointed to that.
Let's just keep it there. Okay. So just a little bit more. Okay. So what you can see here is that it's created the entire network of tweets live. This is live stuff, right? Now you see these orange bubbles, right? Those are your opinion leaders. You can see, obviously, Narendra Modi would be one. I don't know what is Har. Professor SRK, okay. Uday Kumar BJP, right? Raghupati Bhatt. I don't know who these guys are, okay? At Delhi. So these are, so instantaneously, I have now insight into what's happening. Not to the level of saying, oh, I have so many tweets, retweets, which I don't know what to do with, but to know who are my key opinion leaders. My next order of business is going to be to figure out which of these are tweeting what themes. What can I influence? What can I work with? Right? And all of this is happening live right now, right? So you know, we've gone from asking the where, what, who questions to looking at KPIs to you know, asking, you know, what are the drivers of certain things, to looking at sort of live social data and analyzing for key opinion leaders. Now let's look at the future, right? So I know all of this now. So I want to see what is going to be my diabetic population, let's say in a couple of years from now, right? So can we, yeah, let's do 2020. So if you, I don't know if you noticed the data that we were looking at, the original CDC data, CDC Center for Disease Control. So that's real data. That was only up till 2014. Okay, and I've asked a question about 2020, right? So you can see if you go down a little bit, scroll down. Go up, go up. Yeah, okay, sorry, yeah. So model, it's used an ARIMA model. It's got an accuracy of about 98%. Now, when you ask a question like this to an analyst, right, what is going to be my, you know, my population of, let's say, my consumer base in X? There are a few decision steps the analyst has to take. The first is, what do I have to do? So clearly a forecast is being sought. Second, you know, what data set I need to look at, what variables I need to get out. Third, and this is where now the decisions start becoming harder, what algorithms can I apply? Right? So all of the data scientists in this room would know that there is a whole bunch, there are dozens of forecasting algorithms I can use at any point in time. But they have to meet data sufficiency conditions. So I have to do data sufficiency condition checks, find out what I can apply. Now assume there were 10, right? And if I'm a conscientious fellow, I'll run all 10 models and see which one gives me the best results. Once I've seen which one gives me the best results, I still don't go back because I have to do a validation, right? So I'll do an out-of-sample validation to say that, yes, my model is stable and I can go and tell my business. Right? About 5 or 6 decision steps that need to happen, right? Leni's done all of that, and it took about a second and a half, right? We know we analysts can't do it that fast. We can't. We're humans, we're not machines, right? So what does it do? What I've just shown you in the last 15 minutes is about 3 months of an analyst's life. What difference does it make to the business? Now let's go back to that original question, right? Why are people not happy about their analytics investments? It's because they're not getting their answers in time. It's not because the analysis is not good, right? The speed of business, think about it, right? Data science really started taking off in the early years of this century, right? Early 2000, it really started taking off. If you look at how we solve things today, how we build our models, how we get answers to business, is very similar. Very little has changed in the last 15, 18 years. Very little. Tool sets might have changed. Methodologies might have changed. We are trying to experiment with different algorithms now, right? But the process remains the same. The amount of time it takes to build a model is more or less the same. Now think about the business. Is the speed of business the same? It's drastically different. The web economy has completely transformed how consumer and enterprise businesses operate. So where is the, how in the world can you get insights available on time for these businesses to make decisions if you are still doing things the way they were done 15 years ago? It's just not going to work, right? So that's where something like Leni comes in, because Leni then takes the entire burden of BAU off your hands, right? And then what does the analyst do? The analyst focuses on building their competitive advantage. So if I know these are my key opinion leaders, what do I need to do? What can I do to work, get my message more effective while it is still live? Not a month later after I've analyzed and my campaign's, done and dusted, right? So a few other things, just for interest's sake. You can move your stock reports in here. It refreshes them real time. Anytime you look at it, all your dashboards can sit here. And even if they're complex dashboards with algorithms and stuff, it'll refresh them real time. It's constantly learning. So this is essentially where the user input goes in. There's a reinforced learning that is happening. So every time, so for example, I showed you a small section, right? Imagine in a real live organizational environment, you could probably have 80 data sets at the back. So a lot of times what would happen is Leni will find an answer across 5 of them, right? Now, having said that, I as a user probably are interested in 1 or 2. So that's where this feedback will help. As I give this feedback, she will learn from it, and over a period of time, essentially she becomes organizational memory, right? So I'm going to take a pause here. This was my demo. Hopefully you got a sense of where the future is heading. Are there any questions I can take? Yeah?
So I'm interested more about how the technical details work, like behind the scenes, what is happening there.
Sure.
Data architecture you are using.
Sure.
When you ask person, what is happening behind the scenes, they are getting these reports and answers.
Sure. We can do a very detailed discussion after this. But very briefly, about 3 years back, we filed IP on what was India's first big data analytics stack. Okay. So what we have is your standard big data stack looks like storage, processing, UI. Okay. And the analytics happens outside. So it interfaces with the analytics. That's typically how it works. We created our own stack ground up, which has an inbuilt algorithmic layer. So everything is in the form of APIs, which is why for us to configure an algorithm to a use case is like this. You just take it, configure it. That's broadly the structure. We can talk more details if you want later. Yeah? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much, guys.